That is the Mahindra Roxx. And if you are wondering if it is still a Thar, then this is the review you need to watch. If you're new here, at Trippuccino, we do reviews that answer the how and the why with a strong technical understanding. Subscribe to the channel and sit back as we show you the Roxx like you've never seen before. To understand the Mahindra Thar, we need to wind the clock back in time to the Second World War. The US Army quarter-ton truck made by Willis was declared as America's greatest contribution to modern warfare. It was so versatile and so effective that it did everything on the field. They even tried to fly it like a helicopter called rota buggy. After the war ended, it was decided to make a civilian version of this versatile machine, and they called it Civilian Jeep, CJ. Most off-road vehicles around the world today can trace back their roots to this Jeep. Mahindra & Mahindra, under license from Willis, starts to manufacture the CG3A, the first off-road vehicle in India. Willis transferred their ownership to Kaiser in 1953, who licensed Mahindra to build the CG3B in India. The other license goes to Mitsubishi in Japan. That Japanese line later inspires the light Jeep, LJ, Jeep Mini or Jimny or Gypsy, which came back to India. The Jimny story is another video on our channel, linked in the description if you're interested. Anyway, Mahindra continues its CJ run till 1985 when the license ends. So they replace the CJ with MM and launch the MM540 with 2-liter Peugeot engine. 10 years later, the MM550 is updated with a 2.5-liter Peugeot engine. In 1996, the familiar Mahindra Classic makes its appearance. In 2000, we see the Mahindra Major with 2.7-liter diesel engine, which was the last of the CJ series. In 2010, we see the fresh Mahindra Thar, launched with the 2.6 and the 2.7-liter diesel engine options, with 63 horses and 183 Newton meters of torque. 2015, we see the BS4 update, which ups the power and torque to 105 horses and 247 Newton meters of torque with a BorgWarner 4-wheel drive transfer case. And in 2020, the Thar returns in its present avatar, for the first time since the World War, with a petrol engine option. The rest, as we know it, is history, how the niche Thar became mainstream and sold unprecedented numbers with so many variants and options. Now this is the Thar bloodline of the Mahindra SUV DNA, a 4x4 3-door Jeep that is not very practical and is intended primarily for off-road use. There is a parallel bloodline of the more practical but robust Scorpio line, which is ladder frame, family SUV with a 4x4 option. The third line is the XUV 500-700 series, which is car-like monocoque, feature-laden, family tourer with a soft-road all-wheel drive option. Now this Roxx departs from the Thar bloodline and actually moves closer in spirit to the Scorpio bloodline, hoping to sell the Thar style quotient with a practical family-pleasing appeal of the Scorpio and feature-laden pull of the XUV series. And that is why we will consider Roxx as its own line, which will continue to evolve from here parallelly with its own customer base and not as an extension of the off-roader Thar. That's because approaching it as the Thar Roxx, we suddenly find bright white interiors, a panoramic sunroof, ventilated seats and level 2 ADAS. So before proceeding with the review blindly, we need to wrap our heads around its product positioning. The best way to probably explain this is through an off-road on-road spectrum. To the extreme left, on the off-road optimized side, are vehicles which are pure 4-wheel drives, simple mechanicals, basic interiors and body-on-frame construction. The Gurkha is the classic example of this. On the other on-road optimized end of the spectrum are feature-rich monocoques laden with electronics and plush interiors. The 3-door Thar was also somewhere here in the off-road end of the spectrum. Now, you want to increase the size and hence the price of these vehicles without losing respective identity and purpose. You scale up to the 5-door Gurkha on one end and the Hyundai Alcazar on the other. The 5-door Thar Roxx should have logically scaled up here. But Mahindra has completely redefined its product positioning, built it entirely differently to move somewhere here, targeting the Creta, as evident from the comparisons to Creta in every slide of the launch event as the number 1 C-segment player. So the Roxx is now a feature-rich 5-seater, family-inviting SUV with big screens and every possible electronic aid, with a highlighted strength of four-wheel drive capability. A spiritual contemporary for this would perhaps be the Jeep Compass, or the monocoque, and its scaled up brother Jeep Meridian. In fact, in the entire segment, the Roxx length is closest to the Jeep Compass, but within this length, its wheelbase is expanded to match that of the people carrying MPV Innova Hi-Cross. So the positioning of the rocks is kind of complicated, especially from a reviewer's lens. We need to be responsible enough to view the rocks through the right lens throughout this review. Let's drive ahead, promising that we will try to do our honest best to compare it with the right competition for the right aspects. Most reviews just compare changes that are skin deep and stop there, but we need to get to the core of the rocks. In typical Trippuccino style, let's break down the engineering under the skin. The core of the Roxx is this beautiful platform called M-Glide. This has been specifically engineered to suit the unique requirements of the Roxx and is a commendable technical achievement. Let me explain. This M-Glide platform is newly developed 4th generation. It is not carried over directly from the 3rd generation that we saw on the Scorpio N. This is neither a merely stretched out 3-door Thar. The body panels cannot be swapped between them because the front doors have different mountings and all the angles are different. The frame is in fact wider and the car body actually flares out and widens at the bottom by about 6 centimeters. From a very fundamental engineering level, the platform has been designed to give better driving experience of ride and handling. At least the intent is that clearly. Now I'm tired of vanilla reviews which say that both ride and handling are great without any mechanical empathy. See this graph and you will understand both ride and handling are inherently conflicting. You have to trade off one if you want to gain another. So let's clear some basics first. Ride quality or ride is how the car interacts with the road. Any imperfections, obstacles, etc. It's an action reaction between the car and the road only. The driver is not involved. Good ride quality is purely chassis design at its core and how the suspension responds to the terrain. The driver is not involved. Handling, on the other hand, is how the car responds to the driver's input, steering or turning. This is an action-reaction loop between the driver and the car. This will depend on how well the steering turning input is conveyed to the steering rack and how the wheels are turned with the steering knuckle. This is the basic physics difference between the ride and handling. And you have to hit a sweet spot in this trade-off game between these both. Now, if the frame is too light and too flexible and tender, it would simply flap over every small obstacle on the road. The chassis would locally go up and down and offer no resistance to the obstacle. This is obviously bad. If, on the other hand, you make it too heavy and too rigid and stiff, it would have no flex and it would jolt up and down like one single rigid body for every obstacle. That is also bad. Optimizing between weight and stiffness is the key here. For the M-Glide, Mahindra has varied the shape of the frame sections, improving torsion and bending stiffness by 150%. To liberate more space inside the cabin, they have increased the wheelbase 100 mm more than the Scorpio N, yet the chassis weight is 50 kilograms lesser. The lighter the frame, lesser is the stress on the suspension, so you can spring it up easily on a soft suspension. Now that you have the platform, how is it going to get sprung up on the wheels? These two wishbones are the touch points through which the wheel talks to the chassis. Whatever hits the wheel will go through the control arms and to the chassis, through these bushes. This is the ride quality part. And the control arms also move the steering knuckle up and down while the steering rack turns it. That is the handling part. The asymmetric design of this wishbone bushing, soft on the back and stiff on the front, which they have done for the M-Glide, ensures that the sweet spot for ride and handling is achieved. Notice that the axle is moved a little back and the steering rack connects almost to wheel center, which means that the steering is more direct and precise. This is also helped by the steering knuckle itself being taller in this design. In the rear again, the shocks are mounted outside the frame. By separating the mounting parts further apart, this will give a more planted ride to the platform. Even within the shocks, there is a hydraulic rebound stopper which is going to smoothen out the sharp pull out of the piston when the wheel is at maximum droop. If you are an engineer or an enthusiast and wants to know how the suspension design works, we have a detailed video on that when we were making the suspension lift kit. I'll link it in the description below. The, the design of this platform also ensures that the transmission tunnel hump is less, making it easier for the foot space of rear bench passengers once the body comes and bolts onto this. The underbody of the platform has a clean layout. I can see full-length underbody armors coming in aftermarket. Rear has the more expensive Watts linkage, which is great for lateral sway control. We saw it did wonders on the Scorpio N. That was all about the frame. This is a body on frame SUV. So let's talk about the body. The body has been again fundamentally engineered for crashworthiness. If there is a frontal crash, a rigid body will not absorb the impact and transfer the energy completely to the occupants, which is dangerous. A flimsy body, on the other hand, will crush fully and transfer all excess energy to the occupants. The sweet spot is again controlled crushing. So, crumple zones are designed to deform and absorb the energy of the crash. The stress should flow around the door frame and flow all around it so that the occupants are safe and the door remains intact and openable. The stamping and corrugation on the body also addresses NVH, that is noise, vibration, harshness, at an engineering level rather than trying to pack it up with soundproof lagging and carpeting later at the outfitting stage. So we can expect both crash and NVH performance to be top notch with the M Glide. That is perhaps the confidence with which Mahindra have not given any acoustic damping under the hood for the engine noise suppression, unlike other vehicles. Speaking of engines, it is time for our exclusive engine performance breakdown. The 2.2 M-Hawk, my favorite Indian diesel engine, is back again, and analyzing it standalone will offer no practical insight to us. To have a meaningful comparison with another large diesel, we will drive in the Force Gurkha with its updated 2.6-liter diesel engine. The FM 2.6CR from Force belts out 140 PS at 3200 RPM at its peak, while the D22 of the Mahindra hits peak power later at 3750 RPM but higher at 152 PS. The Gurkha also reaches its peak torque of 320 Newton meters earlier at 1400 RPM and holds it flat till 2600 RPM. The M-Hawk makes a slightly higher peak torque of 330 Newton meters a little later in the rev range but holds it flat through a wide band from 1500 revs all the way to 3000 revs. Both cars show this flat torque band indicated by these rectangles. What is the physical meaning of this? Well, within the flat torque rectangles, you will see that power delivery is linear. It will be a nice straight line. So as the revs increase, power is going to increase smoothly without jerks and the drive is going to be nice and smooth in this rev range. You will get good traction and the engine will pull clean as long as you keep it boiling within this rectangle. That's why flat torque maps are advertised as a virtue by car makers. Wider the torque band, better. Now, if you buy the top two models AX5L or AX7L of the Roxx, the engine is tuned to a even higher state and pushes out 370 Newton meters of torque in the same wide rev band, and peak power is at a healthy 175 PS, which comes even earlier at 3500 RPM itself. So remember what we just discussed about the power delivery being linear under the flat torque? In this case, it will be not only smooth, but slope of the power line will also be more. So the Roxx in this variant is going to give you that feeling of rush of extra power in this band because it is more power coming earlier. Wait, but these are the only numbers the brochure and every review ever talks about. At Propicino, we will drill down deeper. This torque is just what the engine makes at the crank. There's a whole transmission and drivetrain it has to flow through to reach the wheel on the road. Let's go further down this mechanical journey. The first part after the engine in this journey is the gearbox. Let's compare the 6-speed manual gearbox of the Thar Roxx with the G32 Mercedes-derived 5-speed manual of the Gurkha. These are the gearing ratios of both boxes at different gears. We start with something called the gear spread ratio, which is the ratio of the highest to the lowest gears. This gives us an idea of the spread of all the gears. The Gurkha has a wide band of 6.53 while the Roxx has a narrower 5.53. Now, this is the entire bandwidth within the gears are maintained. Within this, the Gurkha chooses to divide this band into 5 gears and 1 reverse, while the Thar dissects it narrower into 6 gears and 1 reverse. Comparing the gears, for example, the first gear, you can see the Gurkha having a tall, wide first gear. Similarly, second and reverse are also tall in the Gurkha, while the Roxx has shorter and more overdrive gears. The lower, larger gears are suitable for torque and pulling, while the higher, smaller overdrive gears give better speed and cruising. That is why there is a fundamental difference in the driving characteristics of low and grunt that Gurkha gives, in contrast to the energetic, eager to get to speed and smooth cruising at high speeds that the Roxx gives. The relaxed, tall lower end gears of the Gurkha means that in second gear you can keep pulling, getting traction through a wide speed range, while the Roxx will quickly get off the line, shift to higher gears and cruise smoothly at highway speeds. This will also show you why the Gurkha manages to keep up with the Roxx up to 60 to 80 kilometers per hour. After that, the Gurkha takes forever to get to 100 plus kilometers per hour, while the Roxx keeps climbing eagerly. So if you are a relaxed driver who's not in a hurry but wants to pull along like a freight train all day without breaking a sweat, even while towing a heavy load, then the Gurkha is suitable for you. While on the other hand, if you're an enthusiastic quick runner who loves high speed cruising, the Roxx is set up for you. These are two horses for different courses, and I hope the engine gearbox analysis we have done explains this clearly. The next part of the drivetrain is the transfer case, where both the Roxx and the Gurkha have proper low range gearboxes. Consider this as another gearbox that multiplies the torque even further. And then the next component in this chain is the differential, which also has a multiplying gear inside it. The final ratio by which the torque from the engine gets multiplied by the time it reaches the wheel on the road is called the final drive ratio. And the highest final drive ratio is possible when the car is in its beast mode, that is, first gear in the gearbox, low range gear in the transfer case, and differential also does its part. This max final drive ratio is called the crawl ratio. For the Roxx, this crawl ratio works out to be 42.23, while the Gurkha puts out a massive crawl ratio of 45.43. This is where it gets interesting. The Roxx puts out more torque from the engine, but while it comes to the wheel, the total torque available is 14,358 Newton meters. But the Gurkha will supply a higher total 14,991 Newton meters, while still making lesser torque at the engine because of the better crawl ratio, which puts a higher total torque at the wheel. If no other review has explained you this fact, then please hit that subscribe button. Of course, the higher tune of AX5 and AX7L will put much more torque at the wheels, a whopping 15,625 Newton meters, leaving the Gurkha behind. Fun fact, the Roxx's American cousin, the Jeep Wrangler Rubicon, has an eye-watering crawl ratio of 100:1. Now, I hope you can understand the difference between the Gurkha and the Roxx, and why the Gurkha is so strong in pulling at lower gears and while off-roading, because of this torque monster effect. It can crawl out of any mess you throw at it, even while towing a load behind. While on road, it is slow and ponderous at speeds. In real-world condition, the Roxx's lighter weight helps its power-to-weight ratio immensely, and that translates to superior performance across the board. The Gurkha is massive and heavy, losing out any accrued drive ratio advantage because of its sheer weight. Let's compare the curb weight of all these 4x4s, not gross vehicle weight like some reviews conveniently do to mix and match opinions. Gross vehicle weight is curb weight plus payload, passengers and everything included. Curb weight is the weight of the car as it stands with nothing else in it. While the weight bogs it down, there are a few instances where the heavy weight of the Gurkha does give it some edge over lighter trucks like the Roxx. The weight gives it inherent traction and is, for example, great for towing and pulling loads all day. Besides being undefeated in silly tug-of-war videos that the internet loves, the way that the Gurkha is set up with the torque-friendly gearing ratios and weight distribution on the axles and wheel traction is why the Gurkha manages a gradability of a steep 35 degrees. Fun fact, the Gurkha's German cousin, the G-Wagon, can do a gravity-defying 45 degrees. That's 100% grade. Since we are comparing off-road credentials, let's discuss the off-road hardware differences between the Roxx and the Gurkha. Before proceeding further, it is important to understand how to operate the four-wheel drive kit correctly. I will strongly encourage you to watch our How Does 4-Wheel Drive Work video. It's a basic refresher which will help you understand the mechanics of 4x4 clearly, especially about the transfer case and the differential. It is mandatory viewing if you're planning to buy the Roxx or any other 4x4. Coming back to the 4x4 hardware, both the Jeeps have a transfer case with a proper low-range gearbox. At the axle is where things get different. The Gurkha employs a manual mechanically actuated differential lock on both axles, front and back. What this means is that if one wheel is in the air and the other wheel is in slippery mud, the torque would normally flow to the wheel in the air, which will spin away and waste all that torque if the differential is open. If we engage the diff lock, the entire axle becomes a single shaft with both the wheels forced to spin at the same speed. So the torque would redistribute towards the wheel with slight traction and help the vehicle come out. In the Roxx, this locking action is done electronically by the electronic diff lock on the rear axle only. On both axles, on all four wheels, there are brake locking differentials, which means that, like in the earlier example, the moment the computer detects that the free wheel is spinning away, it will apply brake locally to that wheel alone, forcing torque to flow to the other wheel and the vehicle will come out. Both these are different schools of thought. One is purely mechanical while the other is electronic. In Gurkha, both the wheels have to spin at the same speed once the diff is locked. This is great ground for brutal pulling, but it is an overkill if used for minor troubles. And you also have to steer straight because the diffs have locked the wheels in this brutal deadlock straight ahead. The Roxx setup is more forgiving since it's instantaneous and intermittent braking. It can brake and release at will, so both the wheels can in theory spin at different speeds. So big and small troubles can be dealt with little effort. Since the Roxx has this ability to brake individual wheels on demand, a clever use case is the IntelliTurn Assist, which Mahindra has come up with, where in off-road in 4 low, the inner rear wheel brake locks up and swings the car around in a tighter turn. Fun fact, an extreme implementation of this, if done on all 4 wheels in a grander manner using individual electric motors on all wheels instead of brakes, to cause opposing wheel spins is the popular G-turn of the G-Wagon, doing a perfect 360 on a pinpoint. Back to the Roxx, while the IntelliTurn gets a lot of press, I couldn't find the Roxx's actual turning radius reported anywhere on the brochure or at the launch event or in any other review till date. It would be a good metric to see if the better steering has indeed offset the longer wheelbase penalty in terms of turning radius. Leave a comment below if you know the official turning radius of the Roxx. In terms of off-road geometry, the Roxx has the better approach angle with its short overhangs, while the Gurkha reports a better departure angle. Both have impressive water wading ability, but the Gurkha trumps the segment at a whopping 700 mm. Articulation has always been a Thar strong point over the Gurkha, whose wheel never seemed to droop down or squeeze up into the wheel well enough while off-roading. In summary, if you are a seasoned off-roader who understands the way of the 4-wheel drive, then the simple cable-operated diff locks of the Gurkha can be a deadly weapon in your off-road arsenal. It is the only car in the country with this manual locking differentials, that too on both axles. It is simple, takes effort to operate, but very effective and easy to fix if something goes wrong out in the trail. On the other hand, if you are approaching 4-wheel driving more casually and would like the electronics to do all the work for you, then the computer aids in the Roxx would help you navigate obstacles with almost nil driver involvement. Only caveat is that the electronics have to be reliable and durable under harsh and wet conditions, and if any glitch creeps up, then you can't simply fix it with duct tape and bungee ropes out on the trail. Should put out a disclaimer here. Do not let all the electronic gizmos and the ease of operation of the Roxx fool you in doubting the capability of it off-road. It is still a hardcore Mahindra 4 Explorer under the skin and can be very capable off-road for what most of its customers will put it through. As I said, horses for courses. Depends on what kind of jockey you are. It is sad that no review till date, even big media houses who have unlimited access to both the Jeeps, have been able to properly test out and demonstrate this contrast off-road between the two by pushing each to its limit. I hope I get an opportunity to do a dedicated proper off-road showdown between these two sometime and bring that video to you. With the off-road sorted, let's get on-road and get to the proof of the pudding. the driving impressions. Walking up to the Roxx, it's undoubtedly a handsome Jeep. The small design quirks do catch the eye, but will quickly grow on us eventually, and we will get used to it. For a 19 inches, the shape and size of the Roxx does mask the wheel size really well. I'll not even talk about the childish Rockstar reference for the alloy design. From the profile, the Wrangler looks and the boxy design with the exposed bolts and all give it that air of Jeep desirability that pulls us towards this car. The six-pack grille and that quarter glass on the rear looks like a deliberate differentiation to avoid the Roxor legal chapter all over again, if Mahindra plans to export it to Jeep markets later. Overall, this is no doubt a looker, which is its great selling point. It's got strong road presence and it towers over other cars and hatches and even MPVs on the road. Step inside and the interiors are really a breath of fresh air, unlike any Thar we have seen before, and looks premium for a C-segment Mahindra Jeep. The tactile switches, clean layout and the creature comforts make it very inviting for the driver. The white interiors are a big no-no though. Forget off-road, even as a daily driver this gets super dirty. The seat is comfortable and the ventilated seats are a boon in our weather. Under-thigh support could have been better and the footwell ergonomics is a bit off in my opinion. Overall, the interiors are well appointed. Comparing with cars in the spectrum we discussed before, if you're coming from the left, the Gurkha in contrast feels a decade or more behind with its basic interiors and aftermarket head unit. But if you're coming from the right end of the spectrum, then the Hyundai does trump the Roxx in the interiors. The Roxx on closer inspection still shows that it's a Mahindra with certain bits in the cabin inconsistent in quality and finish. That is where the Koreans clearly win and take the cake. The Roxx is simply not as plush as the Creta overall. Moving ahead with the actual driving experience, it is such a subjective opinion that we will need to compare it with other vehicles to get some context. The Roxx is quick to get off the line and very eager, as we explained its mechanics earlier. The steering is super light, it is precise and crisp. It masks the size of the car very well. Even new drivers coming from smaller cars will find it easy to immediately adapt and drive this. The EPS system is spot on and makes this a delightful daily driver and reminds me of my favorite Ford Endeavour 3.2 steering. In terms of ease of steering, this is easier to drive than even the smaller Jimny. This makes it easily maneuverable despite its size and length in the city. However, depending on what type of steering you're used to, especially if you're a self-proclaimed purist or used to the feedback given by a traditional hydraulic system, this steering may be too light for your liking. In terms of driving ease, it leaves ladder frames like the Jimny and the Gurkha far behind, but it doesn't weigh down at speeds as nicely as the Creta Seltos twins do. The watch link at the live beam which we showed you before helps cornering greatly and cuts side sway, but still the tall ladder frame shows its limits and this is no corner carver. While the engineering effort shines through and the Roxx is very responsive from a ladder frame Jeep standard, it doesn't get first prize for handling. It is still a body bolted onto a separate frame and there is no amount of media praise that can defy that physics. We have to be realistic with our expectations when it comes to the Roxx handling. The ADAS Level 2 suite, I have a very strong opinion about its utility in our road conditions, but the 360 camera does help in negotiating tight parking or maneuvers with confidence without another spotter person guiding you, which is great for its size. The graphics and software are clunky and are definitely not best in segment. Ride quality. This is the part perhaps where I see most improvement from other Mahindra Jeeps that we are used to. The ride is far better than the three-door Thar, as expected from the M-Glide platform. The Scorpio N, which runs on the third-gen M-Glide platform, was a huge improvement from the notorious boat-like ride of the older Scorpios. Well, the Roxx surpasses it, perhaps a notch higher, at par with the new Fortuner maybe. To its credit, the Scorpio N suspension tune is for full load and it does get very sorted when all seats are occupied by passengers. If at speeds you're approaching bad roads and broken patches, with the Roxx it is a different story and you can confidently charge down and flatten them with this abuse-friendly Mahindra suspension. The hydraulic ease in the shocks eases down the droop end in sharp drops where the suspension stretches out to the full. How the vehicle responds to the road is also dependent on the wheelbase because it will determine how far apart in time do the wheels hit the same bump. The longer wheelbase of the Roxx does help here, but low speed ride quality is still unsettling. Like sharp pricks, we do feel small pits and bumps pinching through the floor. Speed breaker up and down, the jolt is still there, but it damps down quicker because of the strut design. I think the Roxx's problem and the main culprit is this 19-inch wheels. If you downsize to 18 inches or go down to the middle variants which already come with 18-inch wheels, that will definitely better the ride. See, for this kind of Jeep, 16-inch with a lot of rubber on the aspect is perfect. But the market wants big wheels, so 18-inch is perhaps a fair upsize. 19-inch is one size too much. The last ladder frame with a 19-inch I remember was the Tata Hexa, and that had surprisingly superb ride quality. The Roxx is definitely not in that league. The grapevine is comparing the Roxx to the Renault Duster and all. That's a bit much, guys. It's nowhere there. Bottom line, in our own spectrum, the Compass and Creta crossovers are still having the better ride compared to the Roxx. Speaking about braking, all four disc brakes. That means it gives a good strong stop despite its size and momentum. There is confidence in grinding it to a halt. But in aggressive braking, the calibration is too sharp and sudden. It bites in without progression and gives a nosedive. On side note, this would have been managed by upper control arm design, about which engineers and enthusiasts, if you're interested to know about the anti-brake dive geometry, then see our earlier video in the description. The second row is perhaps my least favorite place in the Roxx. Firstly, the rear door does open 90 degrees wide, but this area narrows down on the footwell area, making it getting in a little difficult, especially for seniors. The wheel fender is stuck to the door and leaves the clothes brushing the door sill to get dirty. The seats are facing slightly upward and the thigh support is not enough. The backrest can be inclined, but even at full incline of the back, the seat angle is not conducive for long sitting. The occupants of this row will be the most probable to complain about the ride quality. Unless you're on smooth tarmac and gliding, the Roxx will remind the middle row passengers that they are still in a Jeep, and they will in turn remind you about your life choices. You can distract them with the nice panoramic sunroof, which does open up a new dimension and lets in fresh perspective, quite literally. We have to see how much heat seeps in through the sunroof in the summers, or should get a good cool tint on it. If you're considering it as a family car, take long test drives over different roads with the family sitting in the second row and then decide. The increased couple distance compared to the Creta, liberated by the extended wheelbase of the Roxx, does add some additional legroom in the second row, helped by the flat floor with the transmission tunnel managed by the platform design we explained earlier. The white interiors are a sore point and were perhaps a forced choice to make the cabin look more spacious than it actually is. From the second row, we move further back to the boot. Mahindra has tried to liberate as much as boot space as possible with a flat, boxy boot. Some flexibility in dropping the seats to accommodate longer objects is also included. With seats up, 447 liters is very good for the segment. This 447 liters is measured using this ISO or VDA standard, which is an European standard. It is not the volume of air in the boot, it is the number of such kind of 1 liter or 1000cc blocks that you can stack realistically in the boot. American brands like Jeep use a different standard called SAE, and that system uses smaller blocks to cram into tighter spaces and so will report a bigger figure for the same vehicle. Whenever you read a brochure, check which standard the reported boot capacity refers to. The typical Thar split gate will take some time getting used to. I wish they gave the flip and tumble seats from the Scorpio N for the bench, which would have been so practical. And with that, we have come to the end of the vehicle and the end of our review, which brings us to our final verdict. Mahindra dominates sales among the D segment SUV with Scorpio N and the XUV 700 double salvo. It wants to try to bite in similarly into the meaty C segment space dominated by the Korean twins. And they hope to do that with this Roxx. This is how the Roxx stacks up against four-wheel drive ladder frame SUVs. The Roxx runs parallel to much of its bigger stablemate, the Scorpio N, and with its wide variant stack covers all bases right from the Jimny up to the expensive V-Cross. If we compare it against C-segment compact SUVs or crossovers arena, where the company actually wants it to play out, it stacks like this. It goes head to head against the present market leader pair Creta Vitara and overshoots them obviously for the top end with four-wheel drive hardware. Now with that pricing stack, let's get back to the spectrum where we started this. If you're that particular kind of customer looking for a niche off-road workhorse application, then the simple mechanicals, low-end torque, gradability, payload and load capacity and the straightforward 4x4 hardware with no electronics of the Force Gurkha makes a great blank canvas to build it out for any of that niche requirements like farm work, towing duty, chasing storms, overlanding or going crazy with rally spec or even a doomsday device. If you are a solo driver or a small family and the size of these large trucks intimidate you, and you are a petrol head, want something compact for spending most of your life in the congested city, and still if you want to have that quick weekend getaway for four-wheel drive trails, then do consider the Jimny, especially with the whopping discounts I hear of. It becomes your most affordable ticket into the four-wheel drive lifestyle. The Roxx is an earnest engineering effort, and kudos to Mr. Velusamy and his team for pushing it to the best that is possible for a ladder frame Jeep. But if you see it as just another C-segment 5-seater and want a plush, comfortable, luxurious family SUV, then the Creta does trump over the Roxx in ride handling and in comfort and quality. If the eager power delivery and throttle response of that meaty 2.2 M-Hawk pastes a grin on your face like it does on mine, and if you want a highway tourer with your family and luggage in a robust vehicle with abuse-friendly suspension that can take the beating of the hinterland and still be at ease outside a corporate office without calling much attention to itself, do consider the Scorpio N, because personally I find variant to variant the Scorpio N as a much more value proposition compared to the Roxx. But if you want to do a bit of this and a bit of that and then some more, then the Mahindra Roxx is perhaps the only car that can be the only car in your garage. It stands on that proverbial middle ground as a jack of all trades, appealing to a wide range of customers who can pick and choose the exact Roxx they want from the 18 available variants. And if you are a die-hard Jeep head and have always loved the Thar but could never bring one home because you couldn't convince your family or yourself on the practicality of a two-door off-roader, then the Roxx is your here and now. Forget this review and whatever I've said, and book your Roxx now because the waiting period is going to be long. And this Roxx will make you turn back and smile each time you park it, no matter how long you have it for. It is really a special vehicle that can appeal to everyone in the family for different reasons, and you're sure to make lots of memories with it, both on and off-road. You go right ahead and live that life because you deserve it. That was all about the Roxx on that 4th generation M-Glide platform with 2850mm wheelbase. My eyes are trained on the next vehicle that is going to be built on that, and boy am I looking forward to it. Let me know in the comments below which Roxx variant you will be going for or any other questions you may have for me. Subscribe and stay tuned for more from Trippuccino. Bye bye and drive safe.